I don't need to have my head down to read to introduce the next individual. Most of you here know Frank Cannon, who has been really instrumental these past few years, particularly, sometimes I feel like our own side has lost our mind and have decided that social issues are unnecessary to move forward, and Frank Cannon has been really instrumental in keeping the life issue, marriage, as focuses for our cause, for our side. This past year, Frank started raising the red flag about some of what was happening and the downplaying and the ignoring of traditional values in this country. So much so, I think that the RNC, largely because of what Frank was doing, took the step of making sure lots of its members had FaceTime in the March to Life this year. And before the winter meeting, Frank has been an instrumental voice. Frank is the person who put Common Core on my own radar. And without Frank as a voice for a lot of these issues, we tend to want to move on. We want to move to new things, and we want to move to fresh things. And sometimes it's the solid things, the traditional things that we can't depart from. And Frank, God bless him, has been here along the way, making sure we keep our priorities where they should be: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is my pleasure to introduce Frank Cannon.
For those of you who saw that I was handed a glass of alcohol, I want to assure you that's for a toast later, and it's not because I can't perform without it. I want to begin by showing a short video that features Professor Robbie George. He is the intellectual heavyweight behind everything that we do, and he's the person who continues to articulate the best arguments, the natural law arguments in favor of an integrated conservatism. And so Robbie couldn't be here tonight. He wanted me to thank all of you and wish you the best. And now if we just could play the video.
Our nation's founding principles are not mere relics of the 18th century. Our belief is that America's founding principles, the principles of the rule of law, private property, the sanctity of human life, the dignity of marriage and the family, that those principles are as valuable today as they were at the time of our founding. Let's line our policy up with those principles. Let's allow ourselves to be inspired by those principles.
The American Principles Project believes that education is primarily the role of the parent, and that the comprehensive development of a child involves the active involvement and direction of parents.
The fight against the Common Core is showing us the way back to that. And you look at how the movements have risen up in the various states. There's an organized grassroots effort to pull the state out. If you went back to, say, January of 2012, you wouldn't have any red states there. So that has all happened. Most of that has happened in the last 6 months.
It was the Declaration of Independence that represented our true founding. It's those ideals, the ideals of the Declaration, that are the most foundational to our American identity and to our heritage as free men and women.
Opposition to the Federal Reserve nomination is really a new thing, and I think it's a new thing because they have made themselves so politicized, trying to intervene in the economy in such a major way.
You look at the last 5 years, and you look at the employment ratio in the economy, the percentage of people aged 25 to 65 that are actually full-time employed, you haven't seen much of a move. You're very close to 20-year lows. You don't have the kind of revival in the economy and revival in jobs that they're looking for.
We affirm the sanctity of human life, of every human life. There is no human being who is disposable.
A great majority of the American people believe that the conservative, social conservative position is the right position.
For generations, people have immigrated to the United States in search of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The American Principles Project believes in the legacy of immigrants and contributing to the American story.
If American companies cannot find American workers, they should be able to bring in the foreign workers that they need.
We could engage minorities like Latino voters, but without compromising principles. You don't want to start giving up principles, because you're going to end up with a big tent, but very empty. For those who within the party establishment say, let's stop talking about those social issues, well, those social issues were very attractive with Latino voters.
Americans have always done well when we have stood by our principles.
At the American Principles Project, we support policies and initiatives that will really help families and individuals progress, and we believe that with your support, we can do more.
When we set the date for this event, we were very conscious of making it as close as possible to February 6th. February 6th is the birthday of two great Americans. One, Babe Ruth, who there's nothing funny about that. He transformed baseball and turned the Yankees into a dynasty. I hope I unite the room with the next one, and that's President Reagan, who transformed and built the modern conservative movement, and who taught conservatives the important lesson of how to win. Much of what APP tries to do is a direct imitation of the philosophy and style of President Reagan. I want him to describe his philosophy in his own words from a speech that he gave in 1983 to the National Association of Evangelicals. This was the Evil Empire speech, but it contained so much more. In it, he said, "I want you to know that this administration is motivated by a political philosophy that sees the greatness of America in you, her people, and in your families, churches, neighborhoods, communities, the institutions that foster and nourish values like concern for others and respect for the rule of law under God." He went on to talk about the opposition to this, the modern-day secularism that was attacking these notions. And he ended that section saying, "And while they proclaim that they're freeing us from the superstitions of the past, they've taken upon themselves the job of superintending us by government rule and regulation. Sometimes their voices are louder than ours, but they are not yet the majority." It is my belief that President Reagan was right, that they are not yet the majority. But I want to add to this one other, I think, important point, which is that unless we elect in 2016 a candidate who believes in the fundamental principles of this nation, who can bring together and knit together a natural conservatism that is founded on the basic principle of human dignity, then those ideas, those principles, those values we hold dear will be in great, great peril. And our chance to affect that process is very narrow. 1 year from today, the 2014 elections will be in the rearview mirror. The serious candidates for president will be well on their way to establishing their campaigns. 2 years from today, we'll be in the middle of the primary process, and we'll be winnowing the candidates for both parties down. And 3 years from today, we will already have elected and inaugurated the next president of the United States. That's a very small window. So the question is, what do we need to do within that window? What is the things that most give us the chance to put together a winning conservative coalition? Well, that was the basis of a report that Maggie Gallagher, Rich Stanker, and I wrote this fall about what it takes to put together a conservative coalition. I want to just pull out two pieces of that to give you a sense of how we approach issues and what we're thinking about. The first thing I want to say is the central point of that report was to combat a truism in Washington, a sense by consulting class that they know exactly how we can win. That idea is that we must abandon the social issues, get away from them, and rely only on our economic issues. There's just two problems with that. One, it's morally bankrupt, and two, it doesn't work. We tried this in 2012 in the Romney campaign. We tried this in 2013 in the Virginia gubernatorial campaign, and we lost. Okay? We need to develop an integrated social conservatism. Now, let me focus on the war on women for a second. This true strategy of pivoting away is particularly prevalent in that area. That's one in which fighting back is always seen as a losing battle. But what does a true strategy do? It does three things. It energizes your opponent's base. It makes your own grassroots question your seriousness. And it makes people in the middle who are deciding what they think about you believe the worst because you've let the issue be framed by your opponent. It is the stupidest strategy ever designed by a consultant. One irony of this strategy is that the very groups that Republicans and the intelligentsia always focus on going after are actually more pro-life than the country as a whole. This includes youth, women, Hispanics, and poorer voters. So if that's true, how is it that we possibly lose elections? Let's look for a second at the economic side of the question. You need to know one fact and one fact alone to know what the problem with the conservative argument is. When you ask American voters, are they better off than they were, or will they be better off with Romney as the president or Obama as the president, only 34% of people pick Romney. Now think about what that means if that's your strength, okay? When voters were asked what they cared about, what they worried about, 37% of people said rising prices. What does that mean? That means that the people who have jobs are facing stagflation, meaning a stagnant wages, which they have for decades, and rising prices for the everyday goods and services they need to sustain their families. They're losing the American dream, and they're falling behind. Rand Paul is one of the few people who ties this to the right cause. When you ask voters why this is true, most voters say it's because businesses decide to do it. And that's because conservatives have not made the argument. It is government and government's appetite that is in fact causing the massive debt that is being underwritten by bogus money coming out of the Federal Reserve. And until the conservative movement can say, we understand what's happening to you average Americans, to working Americans, then we are going to relegate ourselves as to a party that only speaks to a fraction of the voters. We have the right answer. We need to put it in terms of working Americans, not job creators. Thank you. As Maggie points out, job creators is a neologism, which is a big word, but it means that it's created itself, and all it means is your boss. So, again, if you think getting rid of the social issues is one of the stupidest things you've ever heard, think about an economic policy that says the key to success is helping your boss. And I couldn't make it as a wealthy political consultant. I don't know what happened. Our project at American Principles is to try to develop ideas, arguments, and policies that unite economic, foreign policy, and social conservatism, the three-legged stool on which conservatism stands the firmest. And as we said in the beginning of Robbie's video, and as Marion put it, that all rests on a fundamental idea. Rand Paul likes to talk about the Constitution and the amendments there too. I like to think of it in terms of the Declaration. And if we begin with the assumption that the test of our policies is that they, in fact, advance the human dignity of the individual, and we remember that that individual has been endowed with liberties that cannot be transferred. Inalienable is a very important word. They cannot be transferred because they were given directly to the individual by the Creator. Thank you very much. I would now like to call up to the podium a man who, throughout his career, a career that spans radio talk show host, author, participant in enormous charitable ventures, writer, speech maker, has always had as his guiding star the very principles that we talked about. I'd like to bring up our special guest, Michael Reagan. Before I relinquish the podium, which I know some of you think I'm never going to do, but I am quickly, I want to propose a toast. As I mentioned before, tomorrow is the 103rd birthday of our greatest president, President Reagan, or at least the greatest president of my lifetime.
Mine too.
We're about the same age. Okay, but what I want to say about that is, to Ronald Wilson Reagan, a man who spent his entire career dedicated to the proposition that America can and must remain the shining city on a hill. May all of us do what we can in our own way to advance the principles, the American principles, that keep the light of liberty aflame. To Ronald Reagan.
Thank you.